It was just after noon when Jordan stepped into the glass showroom. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting a glow across the sleek floors and modern furniture. He moved with a lazy swagger, his hands tucked into the pockets of his faded jeans. His plain white t-shirt looked too casual for the space, but he didn't seem to care. His short, messy hair stuck up in places, and his smirk stretched wide as he looked around. The showroom was quiet, calm. Soft music played in the background. Everything felt polished and expensive. Clean lines, perfect lighting, nothing out of place. Jordan, however, looked out of place on purpose. That was his goal. He wanted to be noticed, especially by one person. "Excuse me," he said loudly, approaching the front desk. The young receptionist looked up. "I'm here to see Nia." His tone was too familiar, too loud. Heads turned, including a client browsing nearby. Jordan didn't lower his voice. He wanted attention. "She's still working here?" he asked with a snort, pretending to glance around like he expected her to be sweeping the floor. A moment later, she appeared. Nia walked in with confidence, calm and steady. She wore a sharp black blazer over a crisp white blouse, her black slacks neatly pressed. Her natural hair was open and full, styled with care. She didn't rush. She didn't flinch. She just looked at Jordan and gave a polite professional nod. "Hello," she said, her voice cool and steady. Jordan's smirk widened. "Wow, didn't expect to see you still here. Folding curtains, huh?" His voice dripped with mockery. A nearby client glanced up again, sensing the awkwardness. But Nia didn't respond to the jab. She simply turned to the receptionist. "I'll be with Mr. Grayson in a moment," she said, referring to her client. Then she looked back at Jordan. "Can I help you with something?" He waved a hand. "Just in the neighborhood. Figured I'd check in on my favorite interior designer." He chuckled to himself. "You still just doing the small stuff?" Nia's expression didn't change. Calm. Unreadable. She didn't take the bait. Instead, she stepped aside and motioned to the seating area. "You're welcome to wait here. I have an appointment." Jordan plopped into a chair, still grinning, pretending to admire a nearby coffee table. But his eyes followed Nia as she walked off to assist a client. He leaned back, arms spread along the sides of the chair, trying to look relaxed. But something in his posture gave him away. He was watching, judging, maybe even hoping she'd mess up. It was clear he wasn't there for support. He was there to feel bigger. But as he sat there, trying to act amused, the room began to shift. The air felt different. Footsteps echoed near the entrance, slow and strong. A tall man in a dark navy suit stepped in. His posture was sharp, his hair closely cropped. His gaze swept across the room with quiet power. And when he locked eyes with Nia, everything about Jordan's smirk began to fade. Jordan leaned back in the chair, arms stretched as if he owned the place. He watched Nia with a crooked grin as she spoke to her client. She pointed at design samples on a large display board, explaining things with ease and focus. She moved with calm purpose, her voice steady, her hand sure. Jordan rolled his eyes. Same old Nia. He muttered under his breath, loud enough for a woman nearby to glance at him, puzzled. He stood up and strolled slowly around the showroom, pretending to admire the furniture. His footsteps echoed lightly on the polished floor. He stopped near a shelf of fabric samples and picked one up, rubbing it between his fingers like he knew what he was doing. "Bet she still gets bossed around here," he said to no one in particular, but made sure it was loud enough for anyone listening. His voice carried a mocking tone, his smile thin and smug. He looked over again. Nia was kneeling beside her client, pointing at a rug pattern. She was fully focused, her expression serious, her posture strong. Jordan shook his head and chuckled. "Guess folding fabric's more fun than I thought." He kept circling the space, tapping things, picking up items, not because he was interested, but because he wanted to interrupt. A few employees noticed him. Their glances were short but firm. Jordan didn't care. He felt bold, untouchable. Then he walked past a tall mirror and paused. He checked himself out. Messy hair, old jeans, plain white t-shirt. He tugged at the bottom of his shirt, trying to smooth it out. For a second, he looked unsure, but he caught himself and put the grin back on. He stepped back toward the front, just as Nia finished with her client. She stood, thanked the man, and walked toward her desk. Jordan waited, arms crossed now, trying to act casual. "So, still taking orders, huh?" he said as she passed. Nia didn't stop walking. "I have a meeting," she replied simply. No frustration, no anger, just calm. Jordan followed her with his eyes. Something about her attitude was bothering him now. She didn't seem shaken. She wasn't reacting the way he expected. She wasn't even pretending to care that he was there. He stood near the desk, pretending to look at a wall of framed photos, past projects and magazine covers. One frame had a photo of a modern living room with her name listed underneath as the designer. He blinked at it, his smirk fading just a little. Before he could say anything more, the glass doors opened again. A silence fell over the space, soft but noticeable. The man who entered walked with quiet strength. He wore a dark navy tailored suit, his shoes polished, his face calm but focused. His gaze scanned the room quickly, landing on Nia. He walked straight toward her. Jordan turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing. The man didn't look around, didn't hesitate. He walked up beside Nia and nodded. "Just checking in before our 2 o'clock, he said. Jordan stood frozen, unsure of what he had just walked into. Jordan blinked as the tall man in the navy suit stepped beside Nia. The man's presence was strong but calm. He didn't need to speak loudly or make a scene. His sharp suit fit perfectly, and his polished shoes made soft clicks against the floor. His eyes, steady and focused, showed he wasn't just another visitor. "Everything ready for the meeting?" he asked Nia. She nodded, opening a folder on her desk. "Yes, I had the samples and layout prepared." The man gave a single nod, then glanced briefly around the room. Jordan stood nearby, still trying to understand who this man was. For a moment, Jordan thought he should walk away, but his pride kept him frozen. "Who's this?" the man asked, nodding toward Jordan. Nia paused for only a second. "Someone I used to know." The man's eyes didn't change. His voice stayed calm. "Is he bothering you?" "No," she said simply. "Just passing through." Jordan cleared his throat and stepped forward, trying to sound confident. "Name's Jordan. Just visiting. Didn't expect to see such a fancy operation going on." The man didn't smile. "This isn't just an operation. This is a business, a top design firm. We serve high-end clients across the country." Jordan gave a small laugh. "Right, looks nice. Never figured Nia for something like this." The man turned fully to him now. His expression was still calm, but there was no friendliness in it. "You figured wrong." Nia gently closed the folder and walked toward the display table. "We should start reviewing the plans before the client arrives." The man nodded, then looked at Jordan one last time. "We've got work to do." Jordan felt his throat tighten. The air didn't feel light anymore. The people in the showroom had gone back to work, but the energy had shifted. Jordan wasn't part of the moment anymore. He was outside of it, like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong room. He glanced at the glass wall again. Framed photos of completed projects lined the space. Nia was in more of them than he had noticed before. Some showed her standing beside completed designs. Others listed her name clearly. Lead designer, Nia Thomas. He turned back slowly. The man in the navy suit stood next to her, reviewing plans. They spoke in low, professional voices. Nia flipped through sample boards with ease. She wasn't nervous, not even distracted. She was leading. Jordan took a slow breath and stepped backward. No one stopped him. No one rushed to explain anything to him. He was no longer the center of the room. As he walked toward the door, he passed the front desk again. The receptionist didn't look up this time. He placed one hand on the door handle and looked back. Nia didn't glance his way. She was focused on her work, surrounded by people who respected her. Jordan opened the door quietly and stepped out into the street, the sound of the showroom fading behind him. Jordan stood outside the glass doors for a moment, staring through the window. Inside, Nia was still talking to the man in the navy suit. They were reviewing papers, pointing at plans, focused and professional. No one inside paid him any attention now. The showroom had moved on without him. He walked slowly down the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, head low. The confidence he walked in with had faded. He wasn't sure what stung more, the way Nia handled herself with calm power, or the way the man beside her looked like he truly respected her. A week ago, Jordan had told a friend he was doing just fine. He said he had moved on, doing better, didn't care what Nia was up to. But something had pulled him to that showroom. Maybe he wanted to prove he was still ahead. Maybe he thought she'd be struggling. But she wasn't. She had grown in ways he didn't expect. Jordan wandered into a nearby coffee shop and ordered something just to sit down. He found a seat by the window, still within view of the showroom. He kept his eyes on it, but deep down he knew he didn't belong there anymore. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through social media. He clicked on Nia's page. He hadn't looked in a while. Now he saw post after post of her work, photos of rooms she designed, awards she had been nominated for, events she had spoken at. Everything was clean, focused, and professional. No drama, no noise, just progress. He felt a tightness in his chest, not because he missed her, but because he had underestimated her. For so long, Jordan thought he had the upper hand. When they broke up, he said things he didn't mean, called her too focused, told her to be realistic. He thought she'd slow down, maybe give up. But she hadn't. She had done the exact opposite. In the coffee shop, people moved around him, talking and working, but Jordan barely noticed. His thoughts stayed with that moment. Nia standing tall, wearing her blazer, speaking with purpose, and that man beside her, clearly impressed with her skills. He couldn't stop thinking about how that man looked at him. It wasn't anger or disrespect. It was just disinterest, like Jordan didn't matter, like he wasn't part of the world they were building. A notification popped up on his phone, an old friend inviting him to another casual meetup. Same group, same talk, same empty plans. Jordan sighed and put the phone face down. For the first time in a long time, he felt small. And maybe, just maybe, that was what he needed. As he finished his drink, he looked out the window one more time. The showroom door opened again. Nia stepped out, holding a portfolio, walking with the same quiet confidence. She didn't look his way. She didn't need to. She had already left him behind, long before he stepped through those doors. The days after Jordan left the showroom were quiet, but not peaceful. He spent most of his time replaying the scene over and over in his mind. Each time, it stung a little more. The image of Nia, confident and composed, stayed with him. He could picture her walking through the showroom, speaking with clients, leading discussions, her every move filled with purpose. It wasn't what he expected. He hadn't realized how much time had passed since their breakup. The memories of their arguments, of the time they spent together, started to blur. But one thing was clear now. Nia had moved on, and she had done it without him. Jordan tried to convince himself it didn't matter. He told himself he was doing fine, that he was still ahead, still in control. But the truth was harder to ignore. The feeling that he was falling behind, that he had made the wrong choices, grew stronger each day. One afternoon, a few days after his visit to the showroom, Jordan decided to stop by a local cafe. It was one of those places with a quiet atmosphere, perfect for thinking or avoiding thoughts. He grabbed his usual drink and sat by the window, watching people walk by. But his mind wasn't on the crowd outside. It was on Nia. He pulled out his phone again and opened her social media. This time, He didn't scroll through her posts with the same dismissive attitude. Instead, he focused on each photo, her latest project, her award-winning designs, the way her reputation had grown. It was clear that she was making a name for herself, building something strong, while he stayed stuck in the same place. As he scrolled, he saw a post from a company event where she had given a speech about her work and the importance of diversity in design. Her words were clear and confident, and the room in the photo looked full of people hanging on every word she said. Jordan read the caption below, which mentioned how Nah had been invited to speak at several upcoming events. His thoughts raced. He never imagined Nia would become this successful. When they had dated, he thought she was just trying something. He never saw the drive beneath the surface, the ambition that had pushed her to keep going, even when things were tough. He sighed and set the phone down. The truth was starting to settle in. He had underestimated her, and worse, he had belittled her for chasing her dreams. Now he was left with nothing but empty plans and lost time. He didn't want to admit it, but the feeling was undeniable. He had missed the opportunity to support her, to believe in her vision. Now it felt like she was miles ahead, and he was stuck in the past, watching from the sidelines. Just as he sat there, feeling the weight of his thoughts, his phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend, asking if he wanted to meet up. Jordan stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of what to do. He had spent so much time pretending he didn't care about Nia's success, but now it was all too clear. He couldn't just keep pretending. He stood up slowly, deciding that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from the truth. And perhaps it was time to figure out where he had gone wrong. The next few days felt different for Jordan. His usual routine, the easy distractions, didn't hold the same weight anymore. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was falling behind. He had spent so long focusing on small wins, things that didn't matter in the bigger picture. Meanwhile, Nia had built something real, something solid. The thought of going back to the showroom crossed his mind more than once, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The image of her standing confidently beside that man in the navy suit was still fresh in his mind. Every time he thought about it, his stomach tightened. He knew he couldn't just show up and pretend things were fine. It would feel like an intrusion. Instead, he spent time thinking about his next steps. He had to do something, anything, to get back on track. He knew he couldn't keep feeling stuck. But there was one question that lingered. What had he missed while he was busy mocking others for being successful? And more importantly, how could he start moving forward now? One morning, Jordan found himself walking down the street, the sun shining a little brighter than usual. It felt like a fresh start, but it also felt like he was walking into something unknown. He had no clear plan, just the desire to do better. He stopped at a small bookstore he liked, hoping to clear his mind. The shelves were filled with everything from design to business strategy. He picked up a book on leadership, flipping through its pages without thinking much of it. As he walked through the store, he overheard a conversation between two people at the counter. One of them mentioned a business summit happening in a few weeks. Jordan's ears perked up. The summit was about design and innovation, and several speakers he knew from the industry were scheduled to attend. He hesitated. Attending would mean putting himself in a room full of successful people, people who had taken risks, made hard decisions, and built something real. It felt intimidating. But at the same time, it felt like the kind of challenge he needed. He bought the book and walked out, his mind racing. He didn't know if he was ready for a summit like that. But it didn't matter. He knew he couldn't keep standing still. He had to find a way to move forward, even if it was uncomfortable. Over the next few days, Jordan spent more time researching the summit. He read about past events, looked up the speakers, and thought about how he could learn from them. There were still doubts in his mind, still a part of him that wasn't sure he could measure up. But the more he read, the more he realized that success wasn't just about making a name for yourself. It was about showing up, learning from others, and taking the steps to keep moving, no matter how difficult it felt. By the time he registered for the event, Jordan felt a little different. He still didn't have everything figured out, but he had made a decision. He wasn't going to let fear hold him back anymore. It was time to stop comparing himself to others and start focusing on his own path. As he clicked the confirmation button to sign up for the summit, he felt a small but meaningful sense of relief. Maybe he wasn't as lost as he thought. Maybe this was the beginning of something new.
The days leading up to the summit felt like a blur to Jordan. He threw himself into preparation, reading more about leadership, design trends, and business growth. Every moment he could spare, he spent thinking about the upcoming event. Part of him was still nervous. He wasn't used to putting himself in situations where he didn't feel in control. But something had shifted in him. He had made a decision to be better, and now he was going to follow through with it. On the day of the summit, Jordan dressed carefully, choosing a navy shirt and black trousers. It wasn't flashy, but it felt right. He wanted to appear professional, but not too out of place. When he arrived at the event, he couldn't help but notice how many people were already gathered. Designers, business owners, industry experts. They all seemed to know what they were doing, walking with confidence, engaging in deep conversations. It was a bit overwhelming. But instead of turning around and walking back to his car, Jordan took a deep breath and stepped inside. The atmosphere was buzzing with excitement, people networking, exchanging business cards, discussing projects. He walked through the crowd, not sure where to start but determined to make the most of it. As he stood by a table of pamphlets, a woman came up to him and smiled. She introduced herself as a freelance designer who specialized in sustainable design. They talked for a few minutes about the challenges of working in the field, how the industry was shifting, and how important it was to keep learning. Jordan felt a spark of interest in the conversation. He hadn't realized how much he missed being around passionate, driven people. It was refreshing, and for the first time in a while, he felt like he was in the right place. After their conversation, Jordan walked to a presentation room where the first speaker was about to begin. The speaker was a well-known figure in the design industry, someone he had heard about but never expected to see in person. As the speaker began to talk about the future of design and the importance of innovation, Jordan's thoughts started to shift. This wasn't just about keeping up with the competition. It was about pushing boundaries, about finding new ways to think and create. During the lunch break, Jordan found himself talking to more people, exchanging ideas and sharing experiences. He still felt a bit out of his depth at times, but the more he listened, the more he realized that everyone was just figuring it out, one step at a time. Nobody had all the answers, but everyone was trying. As the summit went on, Jordan began to feel a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in years. He was inspired by the people he met, by the ideas he heard, and by the possibility of what could come next. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was falling behind. Instead, he felt like he was finally moving forward. When the summit ended, Jordan stepped outside into the cool evening air. He had learned a lot, but more than that, he had found a new sense of purpose. He wasn't going to let fear hold him back anymore. He was going to take the next step and build something of his own, something real, just like Nea had done. Weeks passed since the summit, and Jordan found himself in a different place. It wasn't just about the knowledge he had gained, it was about the shift in his mindset. Every day, he worked harder on his ideas, thinking more clearly about what he wanted to do next. He had started setting small goals, things that would help him build a solid foundation, just like the successful people he had met at the summit. He had even reached out to a few of the contacts he made during the event. One of them was a fellow designer who had worked on some of the most impressive projects Jordan had seen. They talked about collaborating, sharing ideas, and working together. It wasn't a huge step yet, but it felt like progress. Jordan also started revisiting his past mistakes. He thought about how he had treated people, how he had belittled others' success. He hadn't been open to learning or growing, thinking that he already knew everything. Now he knew better. Every person he met, every experience he had, was an opportunity to grow. One afternoon, as he walked down the street, Jordan passed a small cafe. It was the same one he had visited a few weeks ago when he felt lost. Without thinking much about it, he walked inside. The familiar hum of conversation and clinking cups felt comforting. He grabbed a seat by the window, the sunlight spilling in, and ordered a coffee. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was from an old friend, someone who had been with him through the ups and downs. The message simply said, "Let's catch up soon." Jordan smiled, thinking about how much had changed. He hadn't realized how important his friends were until now, how they had been part of his journey even when he didn't appreciate them. As he sipped his coffee, his thoughts turned back to Nia. He hadn't seen her in weeks, but he knew she was still moving forward, still making a difference. He wasn't jealous anymore. In fact, he admired her. She had done something he hadn't been brave enough to do: take risks, follow her dreams, and stay true to herself. It was clear that she had built something that mattered. Jordan didn't know if they would ever speak again, but he had come to terms with it. He wasn't looking for validation anymore. He was focused on his own path now, and that was enough. The journey ahead felt less intimidating. Jordan no longer felt like he was behind. He was moving at his own pace, making steady progress toward his goals. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready for whatever came next. As he finished his coffee and stood up to leave, he felt a sense of peace. The world outside was full of possibilities, and Jordan knew he was finally taking the steps to build something real. It wasn't about being the best. It was about showing up, learning, and doing the work. And that was exactly what he was going to do.